All right. Hello, everyone. Neo from Regensturm here, and yeah, welcome to our first ever live stream, live training, whatever you want to call this. Glad you have everyone's here. Hey, Andrew. Hey, Muad, Stian. Hey there. Welcome to the stream. So yeah, let me quickly give you a rundown of what we're going to do today. So, um, we are going to look at all the retargeting options for animations in Unreal Engine 5, including characters, like character animation, like full body character animation, and for replacing characters in motion. And then we're going to look at animations that you're going to add for one-off actions, like abilities, for example, or attacking and similar. We are going to swap the character that ships with motion, the Unreal Mannequin, with one from the marketplace. We're gonna retarget some character animations that also sourced from the marketplace. So using other walk animations, for example. Then we are going to create a new animation layer with these animations, so we can swap them out at runtime or to begin with, however you like. And then we're gonna briefly talk about actions and motion and how in the future motion will make use of the gameplay ability system. Before we start, I want to give some short acknowledgements. So the stream delay for this stream is a bit higher than usual for better quality, and so subtitles work. This stream is going to use Unreal Engine 5 for free and a developer build of Motion 1.4. 1.4 will release in 3 days, so September 14th. A replay of the stream will be available right after the stream ended, so you can just rewatch it at any given time. We will probably also make segments of the stream available as individual videos that are a bit more edited, so you don't have to scrub through the whole stream. There'll be a Q&A segment at the end, but you're free to throw in questions in between, and whenever time allows it, I will look at your guys' questions and answer them. And as always, when replicating this, make sure you have a backup of your current project or make a separate branch in your VCS to prevent any data loss, just in case something goes wrong. All right, so we're going to start with a 50-minute clip of a stream that happened just a couple days ago from Epic Games for animation and Lyra. I edited this down and added subtitles to it, and I'm going to add some commentary to it for things that are relevant to motion. So yeah, let's just start with that. Let me just get this open real quick. And there we go.
The characters. So by default, it comes with our new UE5 mannequins. We call them Manny and Quinn, the masculine and feminine versions of our new mannequin. And these guys have kind of our new standardized skeletal format, which differs slightly from the UE4 mannequin that you're probably familiar with. And there's some things you have to be aware of when swapping animations that are intended for the UE5 mannequin onto a different skeletal mesh. By default, depending on the type of skeleton that you're bringing in, the animation may or may not be compatible. And so what I'm going to show you here today is the suite of tools that comes with Unreal Engine 5 for retargeting. So the outline here, we'll cover what is retargeting exactly, so that you understand, what it is that we're looking at. We'll understand what all our options are for retargeting animation in Unreal Engine 5. We'll take a look at, then we'll deep dive into some of those options. So there's simple retargeting, or also known as translation retargeting. We'll understand how that works. We'll look at the more advanced IK retargeting, and we'll understand how that works. And then we'll go through and actually set up an IK retarget. And at the end, we'll do a live demo where we'll take a random skeletal mesh off the Unreal Marketplace, rig it up with an IK retarget, and put it in Lyra.
So for that part, I'm not going to use the part that's been shown on stream. I'll be doing that live myself in case you guys have any questions, and so I can just answer them directly and directly show it in the editor. So we're only going to watch the bit where he explains all the different types of retargeting that exist in Unreal Engine 5. But for the live bit and the creation of the IK retargeter, I'll be doing that myself.
You can see exactly step by step how we actually take the character in Lyra that we provide and allow you to swap in any skeletal mesh off the store. Okay, so let's get started. What is animation retargeting? As I alluded to, it's the process of transferring animation between different skeletons. So you bring in your skeletal mesh from your own production or somewhere on the marketplace, anywhere out in the wild, really, it doesn't matter. Um, unless that skeleton is identical in terms of, well, we'll talk about it later, but unless it's pretty much identical to the source animation that we're copying from, you do need to do some kind of retargeting, and the degree of difference between your skeletons will determine what type of retargeting to apply. So what are the ways in which
Forgot to
I'm
edit
getting
that
some
out.
audio feedback? It's weird. So what are the ways in which skeletons can vary? Short answer is there's lots of ways. The long answer, I've listed them here. So, you have the names of the bones in your skeleton, how they're oriented. In other words, this is something that kind of confuses people, but think about like your elbow. So your elbow can only really bend in 1 degree of freedom, and the axis that the rigger chooses to assign to that degree of freedom is somewhat arbitrary. Like it could be the X, Y, or Z axis that causes it to bend in the direction that it's supposed to. If the target skeleton that you're playing your animation back on is different, maybe that X rotation is now a Y rotation and your elbow's bending, up in the wrong direction. You're breaking elbows. So they can, you have to make sure your orientations are correct. The reference pose has to be identical between your source and your target. So that's the pose that defines uh, basically where there's zero rotation been applied to your skeleton. And that's often either a T pose or more often in the case of Unreal, an A pose, where the character is standing there with their arms kind of at 45 degrees looking like the letter A. Then you have your parent-child relationships or your hierarchy. So this is how the bones are parented to each other. Are your shoulders parented to a clavicle? Is the clavicle parented to the top spine bone or maybe the mid spine bone? Or is there an extra bone in between? Like those kinds of things. The proportions of the character matter a lot. Do you have long chimpanzee arms, short little dwarf arms? Like the proportions will determine how the animation looks when you're transferring. The scale of the character, are we transferring animation from a tiny little character onto a massive giant or vice versa? The number of bones, even the number of limbs. So all these things can vary and they can all determine the right approach. And my hope here is that I can actually like give you a bit of wisdom, because this stuff gets really complicated, and it wasn't clear to me when I started using Unreal what the options even were, much less which one to choose and how to make that decision. It's kind of complicated, unfortunately. There are good reasons for why things are complicated in this manner. There's a lot of performance considerations and complexity considerations to make. So I'm hoping by the end of this little presentation here, everyone who has these questions will kind of uh, understand, what decisions to make. Okay, so depending on the discrepancies between your source and target skeleton, you have these basic options here. So you can do no retargeting if they're identical, and that is the ideal. You should always, if you have the ability, try not to do what I'm going to teach you to do today. So in the perfect world, your skeletons are identical. You don't worry, you don't think about retargeting, and you go on your merry way. If that might entail, even going back into your DCC application, Maya, Blender, what have you, making modifications to your skeleton to make that happen. If you can do that, if that's an option for you, do it, because retargeting, requires a bit of expertise. It requires some extra computation. So avoiding it is the best case scenario. But of course, characters are not all identical lockstep, carbon copies of each other in most productions. So some amount of retargeting is inevitable. For the next case, we have simple translation retargeting. We'll talk about that more. There's copy pose from mesh. There's the compatible skeletons, which is new in Unreal Engine 5, and IK retargeting, which is also new in Unreal Engine 5. So we'll go through each one and help you understand which one to choose and when. So the first scenario, you have your source and your target skeleton on the exact same skeleton asset. They have the exact same reference pose and they have the exact same proportions. Right on. You don't need to use retargeting. This is a scenario where you can just play sequences and they're going to just work, quote unquote. So how does that work? Well, the bone transforms stored in the animation sequence are decompressed and applied directly to your skeleton based on the names. And because we've guaranteed that all the orientations and bones and everything are identical, it's going to play back just fine for you. So that's That's the ideal scenario.
That one is actually very easy to set up, and we will actually show that later in engine. It's a very nice new feature in Unreal 5, and it makes things a lot easier because if you guys use Unreal 4, you will probably remember getting animations of the marketplace or somewhere else that will come with their own skeleton. You will have to do a retargeting of these animations onto the new animation, and with this one you can basically just skip it. If you open your animation drop down, like you open the skeleton first, you mark the new skeleton, which you know is the same as compatible, you add it, you save that, and when you go back to the animation editor, you will in the drop down where you see in the list of all the animations that are compatible for a skeleton, you will just see all the other new ones too. Done. Very easy, very preferable.
Now we're going to get things where things get a little bit kind of dicey. In this scenario, you have the same, your source and target are on the same skeleton asset. They have the same reference pose, but they have different proportions. So you might have a lineup of characters in your game from like short, medium to tall, maybe with different varying hip widths and shoulder widths. And in this case, you need what we call translation or simple retargeting. This is very common. This is what you see all the time in games like Fortnite, where multiple characters are sharing the same animation set despite having different lengths of legs and arms and so on. And you do need to set up the translation retargeting options correctly to make this work. If you don't, you will very quickly notice that when you play an animation on a character with different proportions than what it was authored on, you will get either floating feet or feet that are below the ground. So if the hip height in the source animation is here and the hip height in the target skeletal mesh is here, that delta will not be maintained, and the character will basically just move down or up depending on the scenario. So to fix this, you need to get into your skeleton asset, and you'll find these hidden translation retargeting options. So there's this drop down menu here in the skeleton tree which hides these, so you have to turn that on, and then you'll get this option which is per bone, and you're telling each bone how it should transfer the animation from the source skeleton to the target, in terms of just the translation. So this doesn't make any modifications to the rotation values. It's just the translation which holds the proportional difference. So if you think about like a character with really long legs, the knee bone is going to be translated further. And so if we just copy that translation value from the source directly, it's not going to it's going to stretch or squash that bone, right? And we don't want that. More often than not, what you want to do here is take your pelvis bone and set it to animation scaled or animation relative. And that will compensate so that you can play the same animations on your short and tall characters, no problem. So yeah, that's your most common scenario. Now we're going to get into things that are a little bit more crazy. So in this third scenario, we have the same hierarchy, same reference pose, but they're on a different skeleton asset and with possibly extra bones. This is also a very common scenario that we have on Fortnite, and many Unreal productions deal with this. And your options here are twofold. So you can do a copy pose from Mesh, or you can use compatible skeletons, which is a new feature in Unreal 5. So I want to talk about this extra bones part. This is super common where you have maybe identical or characters that only differ in proportion, like what I was just discussing, but they also have some additional thing on them. Like it could be a backpack or a ponytail or some kind of accessory that requires extra bones. Now, if you import that onto the same skeleton, those extra ponytail or backpack bones will get globbed into the skeleton asset itself.
This is something you often see in the skeletons of the Paragon assets or the characters on the marketplace. We actually use one of them in one of the samples demos I'm going to do later, the Twin Blast character, and you can see how they have all these extra bones for the gun, for the ultimate ability, which I think has like 20 bones or something, and it makes everything really cluttered. And with this, you basically avoid that. And while I'm pausing, let me check. No, I can't modify the subtitles. That is unfortunate. They're a bit big, but all right, let's continue.
And so you can imagine that that's not a very scalable solution, because over time your skeleton asset is just going to grow and grow and grow, and it never gets smaller, because it's going to have like every ponytail, every backpack, every accessory that you've ever added to your game is just going to keep getting globbed into there, and it gets really unwieldy. And it's just not a scalable solution. So what we recommend then is using something called copy post from mesh. And so the way that works is you import your skeletal mesh, say your backpack or your character with a ponytail, but you import it on its own unique skeleton asset. So all those unique bones go into a different skeleton asset. Now the problem there, of course, is you can't now share animations because they're on a different skeleton asset. So we provide this solution called copy post from mesh. I think I have a picture of it here. So we'll go into details on that. So the way this works is you run um, two skeletal mesh components in your actor blueprint. The source skeletal mesh is running your normal base layer of animation. So that includes your run, walk, jump, all that kind of stuff. Your second skeletal mesh is parented underneath it, and that contains just the extra accessories. So you split those off from the main character, like their ponytail, backpack, or whatever. You put it on a separate skeletal mesh that's parented underneath the source, and then you create a custom animation blueprint just for your backpack or just for your ponytail, and you put in that animation blueprint a copy post for mesh node with the reference to the source mesh component to copy from. So it'll go there, it'll copy all the bones that are common between your backpack and your base character so that your backpack is in the right pose. So you can imagine for this to work, you actually have to have in your backpack or in your accessory all the bones going up from where it attaches. In the case of a backpack, it would attach its spine too. So you need to have all the way from root, pelvis, spine 1, spine 2, spine 3, all the way up to the bone where your backpack attaches have to be in there and identical. And then the copy post from mesh is going to copy all those similar bones, all those bones that are common between your source and your target, so that your backpack ends up in the right place. Like if the character's bent over, you need the backpack to stick there, right? So that entire pose gets copied over verbatim. And then after the copy post from mesh node, what's kind of cool is your backpack is now attached to the base skeleton. It's moving along with the skeleton. So as the character moves, the backpack comes along. But you also have the ability now to add custom animation to it. So if you want to add floppy things like you see in Fortnite skins, or even like a custom animation sequence that loops on the backpack, maybe, you know, like there's a skin in Fortnite with a dog in the backpack, so you can just like it can become essentially its own entire character, right? And you have your own animation blueprints. You can customize the heck out of it. This is extremely powerful, and I want to make sure that people understand that copy post from mesh is your ticket out of the mess that is putting everything on one skeleton. So this is how you make this is like the foundation of modular characters. There's a lot more to it, but um, you know, hopefully everyone's aware of that now. Parallel to that and similar, there's also compatible skeletons. So this is a new feature in Unreal Engine 5, and I think it's important that people, first of all, know that it's there and understand what the intention was behind it. So the way compatible skeletons work is much like copy post from mesh, you have an identical skeleton, but possibly with extra bones on it, and it's on a different skeleton asset. So but you just want to play, you want to be able to, it's a different skeleton asset, but with identical bones and hierarchy, right? So you just want to be able to share animations between them. You want to just tell Unreal, hey, I know these aren't the same skeleton asset, but they're actually the same skeleton. So just treat them like they're the same, right? And so you can do that now in Unreal Engine 5. In the skeleton asset editor, you go under window. It's a little bit hidden, but you go under window to asset details, and you'll bring up this little tab here with this array called compatible skeletons, and you can add references to other skeletons in there. So you can take your base skeleton and say, hey, this other variant is compatible with you, and then that variant can play any of the sequences that base skeleton has. You can share animation blueprints with that base skeleton, and it basically treats it as though they're sharing the same skeleton, but without all the cruft that comes from actually sharing the same skeleton asset. Terminology is failing me here. I'm going to say skeleton about 400 times before we're through this. Okay, so that's compatible skeletons and copy pose. And now we're going to get into the wacky, crazy last scenario. So this is like your hierarchy is different, your reference pose is different, there are different skeleton assets, there's missing bones, there's extra bones. It's a completely different character, right? So there's no hope.
This is what you will most likely to encounter when working with metahumans, because the meta rig of metahumans have lots of extra bones So this is usually what you will have to do. You might get away with copy posts, but copy posts and this are not that much different, but this is going to get explained now.
Of like getting these things aligned in any kind of way. And really what this is about is getting more reuse out of your assets. So if you have a walk cycle, for example, that's been authored on a fox, and you have maybe an alien that looks kind of dog-like, but they have maybe, you know, some extra bones in their leg, and their spine is made of 6 bones instead of 4. You know, just they're structurally similar enough that you think the animation could conceivably carry over, but the skeletons are completely different. So none of the previous methods that I mentioned will really help you out in this scenario. This is where you need to rely on IK retargeting. This is a new feature in Unreal Engine 5. It's our nuclear option for when everything else fails, but you still want to salvage some of your animation and transfer it between characters. So this is kind of what we're going to concentrate on for the remainder of this, because it's fairly sophisticated. It's also powerful, and it has a lot of use cases, and it's new. So let's go over it. So at a high level, how does this thing work? It's exactly like copy post for mesh. So we deliberately designed it to work under the same paradigm, so that if you know how copy post for mesh works, you now have retarget post for mesh. And whereas before you would make a copy post for mesh node, now you make a retarget post for mesh node. It's exactly the same, and you copy from a source mesh component. The only difference is that this node here um, doesn't make any assumptions about your source skeleton. You need to tell it how your source and your target relate to each other. And the way you do that is through a IK retarget asset. So we can go through now.
All right. So yeah, we can go through this now. Let me just quickly switch to Unreal Engine over here. All right. So this again is a project using developer build of Motion, Motion 1.4, which comes out in 3 days. Just a test project. What I imported is a couple of assets. I think all of them were free of the month at some point. So I've got the flexible combat system here to grab me some animations that we will later retarget to work with the Unreal 5 mannequin or the skeleton. So we can use those in a new animation layer. I've got a knight character here that we are going to swap in for the mannequin that's used by default in Motion. Yeah, we're also gonna do an IK retarget on the Twin Blast character from Epic Games, and then a nice little environment here because looks nice. All right, so let us start by swapping out the character that is used in Motion. So compared to Motion 1.3, a couple of things have changed. So you can see Motion makes use of three skeletal meshes here. One is the mesh, one is called headless, and one is called full body. Actually, let me swap that. That's the wrong one. So let me quickly explain what each of these does and how we're going to use them. So mesh is the base mesh that is using the base animation blueprint that also ships with Motion and Lyra. So this is going to be our mannequin base blueprint, which contains all the links and logics to all the features that are being provided. And this one is not being displayed in game. We're going to hide that. It's pretty much unchanged here, except for this option here, which is called visibility based animatic option. Thanks on this point to another for pointing this out. So the thing is, if you not render a character, if you make him invisible, if you don't render anything, the skeleton will not refresh. And we needed to refresh because in our subsequent meshes here, which are headless and full body, our child characters, all we do is we have an animation blueprint that just calls copy pose. And the reason we do that is that first, when dealing with animation layers, we only have to deal with them once because all the subsequent meshes are just copying the pose. So here in the construction script, for example, where we call link anim class layers, which uses our unarmed anim layers by default, containing all the animations that we need for motion to work, or walking, jumping, crouching, etc. We don't have to make any calls for the child meshes because they just copy what happens. So this is why we need this always to tick. And yeah, that's pretty much it for that. Our headless mesh is the one that the player is going to see when they're playing the game. So let me just start it real quick. So the headless mesh is exactly the mesh that's now on screen. And the third mesh, the full body, it's kind of hard to see. You can see the full body mesh is just the shadow here. Like the mesh we're controlling obviously doesn't have a head, but for reflections and shadows, we still want the character to, have a head. So all we do here is basically have the same mesh twice, but what we do is we disable shadows on the headless, um, disable rendering on the full body, and just hide the bone, the head bone on the headless one. The alternative to that would be to open your character model in any 3D software like Blender, Maya, whatever, and remove the head from the mesh and just use that here. But I feel like since many people are using meshes from the Unreal Marketplace to start with or to prototype, this is an easier way to get started, because, or a quicker way to get started, because you don't have to actually, ask the author for the source files, edit it, make sure it exports correctly, imports correctly, and works completely as intended here. So this is just a quicker way of doing it. So now, after explaining everything, we will go ahead and check out the mesh that we are going to swap in now. So again, this is from the marketplace. I specifically chose this one because this also demonstrates a very common use case. As Unreal Engine 5 is relatively new, you will have many character models that may have not been updated for a while and that are running on the Unreal Engine 4 skeleton, which you can't just drag and drop into Motion or Lyra and expect them to work correctly. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an IK retargeting here from UE4 to UE5. Um, so if you're on Lyra, you may not have these files in the project, but what you can do is you can go to add feature content pack, and then you can add the third person character sample, which will add these folders to your content folder. And there, inside there, in the characters mannequin UE4 rigs folder, you will find these two IK retargeter, which already provide you with the definitions that were just explained to translate the character from to translate the animation from UE5 onto the UE4 character. This way, we don't have to retarget any animations, make any duplicates of our animations, which we're also going to do later, by the way. It's just an easy and quick way to get your UE4 character running in a UE5, environment or blueprint, animation blueprint. So what we're going to do is we are going to open our skeletal mesh. We're gonna right click it. We're gonna go to create, and we're gonna go to anim blueprint, which makes an animation blueprint based on the skeletal mesh, a skeleton of this character. I'm just gonna call this 8bp underscore night. And yeah, all we need is the retarget post from mesh node here, as just explained. Just gonna connect this here. And in the IK retargeter asset, we choose UE5 to UE4. You might think, hey, I'm using a UE4 character. I want to go to UE5. Why I'm not using the UE4 many to UE5 many? The logic is the way around. You always choose the source, and then the name is source to target. So our source animation is Unreal 5, and our target is a UE4 character. This is why we use the UE5 many to UE4 many retargeter asset. We're just gonna compile and save that. Now we can head back to our motion character blueprint. And now for the headless and full body mesh, we can just select our new mesh. So I have a couple variations here. I'm just gonna go with the first one. Oh, wait, this is the wrong one. We're gonna change it in headless, not the mesh. We want to keep the mesh as is. Oh, sorry about that. My phone's ringing. So we're gonna change to the headless here. We're gonna change the headless to our knight here again. In our construction script, we have a node hide bone by name. So in the viewport, you're gonna still see the head, but in runtime, it's gonna disappear. And for the animation blueprint, which will reset, we're gonna choose our ABP knight, and we're gonna do the same for the full body, where we choose our skeleton mesh and our animation blueprint. Hit compile, save. And now if we hit to the game and press play, we will see that our character has been swapped out and all the animations from the mannequin or the mannequin blueprint just copies onto the new character. So this is quick and easy, you know, UE4 to UE5 or UE5 to UE4, however you want to name it. That's quite easy, but sometimes you will have issues with characters that that have a different skeleton, like explained at the end of the previous clip. It may be a mixer mode character. It might be from one of the Synphy assets. I believe they have a custom skeleton, which is not the default UE4 or UE5 character. So the animation won't translate that smoothly. And in the next segment, I'm just going to demonstrate how you're going to deal with that. So in this example, I'm going to use the Twinless character. Let me just quickly open him up. There we go. So let's start with the skeleton. So a couple of issues here. You see, this has a lot of extra and bones for gameplay purposes, for the weapon, whatever it is. And it also misses a couple of spine bones, which are used by the UE4 character or the mannequin. I believe it's 4 or 5. This one only has 3. And yeah, this is basically what you want to avoid in UE5, since you have the option to make these modular skeletons or modular characters, as just explained. This is something you want to avoid. So without double checking or triple checking, hey, maybe I can get this work with simple translating or copy post, we're just gonna assume, okay, this is a completely different character. It's somewhat the same. We somewhat want to use our we want to use the animations that ships with motion on Lyra. But we're just gonna assume if we were to try the simpler options, this is not gonna work. So again, like in the previous clip mentioned, this is the nuclear option, and we're now going for it. So what we're going to do is we are going to right click animation and then IK retargeter, and we want to select our twin blast skeleton. Sorry, no, we want to make an IK rig first. Sorry about that. I kind of prepared the stream a bit and forgot to delete some of the things. So sorry about that. So yeah, we want to make an IK rig first. And for that, we're going to choose the skeleton mesh we make the IK rig for, which is our twin blast mesh here. And I'm going to call it IK twin blast demo since we already made one. And this will open up this little editor here. So, in order for this to work, we need to make a couple of chains. So these chains basically define groups of bones that we want to translate to the other skeleton. You can make this like super detailed, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to go with a very simple one. So to start with, we're gonna make the pelvis our retarget root. In 5.1, Unreal Engine will also, this will be revamped in Unreal Engine 5.1. There will be some revamps to this editor, a couple more warnings, like for example, in 5.0, not setting a retarget root will not give you a warning. And when in the IK retargeter tab, it will just like not work, and you won't know why. And this is like one of these like smaller things, but yeah, in 5.1 that's gonna be improved. So let's start by making our first chain by going with the spine bones. So we're gonna right click them, we'll select them, right click them, and then go new retarget chain from selected bones, and we're just gonna call that spine. Let's go with the arms. So let's select the upper arm, lower arm, and hand. Make a new one, call this left arm. Let's do the same for the right one. Call this right arm. Then we're gonna do one for the neck. One for the head. Keep in mind, chains can also just consist of a single bone. That's completely fine. So we're just gonna name this head. And then for the legs, we are going to make a new one. Left leg and right leg. All right. That's pretty much it. But we also want to add some IK and FK solvers, um, just for features like when the character stands on a stair, you want the left foot to be a bit higher if he's only standing with one foot on one stair, and the other one be on the ground. So you want the knee to bend, and for that to work, we're gonna add some IK goals. So what I'm going to do now, let's start with no. Actually, you can multi-select. So I'm gonna select the two ball bones here, and then go for the hands. Motion doesn't make use of them by default, but you will want them for advanced features, like if you want your character to like lean against the wall with their hands, if you add that to your game, or holding weapons and stuff like that, you want to add some IK goals for these. So let me find the right hand, and we're just gonna right click, new IK goal. For the solver, we're just gonna use the full body IK, and this will add like these little yellow boxes to them. And actually, while selecting them, you also want to right click pelvis and set retarget root. No, sorry, set root bone on selected solver. So the solver knows from which bone up it has to start gathering information for the solver. And now all that's left to do is to assign these IK goals we just created to the chains that we created earlier. So I'm just gonna go left arm gets the left hand goal, the right arm gets the right hand goal, the left leg the ball ball L and the ball R over here. And if I move this up, you can see this works not quite as intended. Again, we're going for rather simple. Actually, wait. Uh, Okay, we can go to this back to this later when we have some time. Um, but yeah, but basically, you want to add. This is like the default setup. You can do some detailing here. You can add some additional IK targets. You can make some additional chains. For example, I think the UE5 mannequin by default has chains for the individual fingers, etc. But yeah, for the basic setup, this should be enough. So now once we created our IK rig, we can go back and create our IK retargeter. So this is going to be based on our IK rig that we just created. And I'm just going to call this IK Twin Blast. Oh, call this, no. I think the Epic's notion was RTG for this. So let me just do that. Right. Actually, no, I'm wrong. Sorry. You want to create an IK retargeter based on the rig you want to copy the animation from, so the source. And the source in this case would be the IK mannequin that ships with motion. My bad. Let me just call this RTG Twin Blast 2 real quick. And opening it, this will show us this new window. And here for the target IK rig asset, we want to select the IK rig we just created, which will also show our Twinblast character over here. And you see, this has already mapped some chains automatically. But you can also see some of these are not right. Or maybe there are. I'm not too sure. We can check in a bit. So what happens sometimes is that given that this is only using like a fuzzy string algorithm to like match the names, um, this won't always be right. You will sometimes have issues with this because not everything, you will have an artist not naming it the same as you do, and so you probably want to double check whenever this is being auto populated if everything is really as intended. So yeah, we can just see if this works by selecting an animation. Let's go with walk forward. And this already looks decent. Please ignore the weapons here. Again, not a modular character, not using the new technical abilities we have here. So yeah, this is one of the things that you basically avoid doing it this way. You don't have to consider the weapon specific animations or gameplay specific animations or accessories like the backpack that was mentioned earlier when working with just this base movement animations. So this looks a bit good. We can make some adjustments here though in case something is not. So we can click over here, edit pose, which will set them both to the A pose. And let's make everything a bit smaller here by reducing the bone draw size. And let's say we were unhappy with, like rotation of the arm or the forearm over here. We can see this has a slightly bigger angle. So let's see if we can match that a bit better. And just click the other bone over here. Rotate that a bit. And we can just like click this again to go out. Check our animation again. And yeah, this looks pretty good, I would say. Something you want to keep in mind is the IK down here. You want to make sure, do the feet actually touch the ground? And in this case, they do. Does everything else looks pretty good? I would say so. Yes. Another thing you can do. Let me quickly just find that over here. Where is it? Yes. So let's say one of these chains that you've set up isn't quite behaving as you'd like to. So let me keep this running. Let's focus on the left arm over here. And let's say this isn't quite as you expected. It's slightly off, it's not quite as how you wanted it. And so what you can do, you have a couple of options to play with. So static offset, for example, adds, just a straight up an offset to the animation. So you can just, oh, my editor is freezing. Oh, let me just pause that. Let me just, my computer is not happy about me doing that. Give it a second. All right, let me just like enter these values so you can see it directly. So you can add an offset. So let me add like, to really highlight, how this works. So for the left arm, so all the bones we selected in the IK rig for the left arm, which is from upper arm to hand, we add an offset of like, let's say 50, and you can see the arm goes up a lot. In this case, makes not so much sense because the animation looks pretty all right as is. But in case it doesn't, if it's like slightly off or if the feet are slightly off the ground, it's like floating or whatever, you can fix it using that. And another interesting adjustment you can make here is blend to source. So this controls how much of the source versus the target um, uh, position from the IK is going to be used. So So you can see in the original, it was a bit more, it was a bit different. You know, the arm leans a bit more. It goes a bit down, it goes a bit further down. Depending on the animation and the character, again, this is something you can just play around with. You can see, okay, what looks better? What do you feel like works better for you? Is there any clipping issues you have? Anything you want? So for the arms, let's just make this one because, you know, looks better. So yeah, that's it. We can just save that for now. And now we are just going to do the same like we did with the knight to swap the character in. So I already made the blueprint here, and it just is using the same node again. You know, you right click the mesh, um, select create anim blueprint, and you add the retarget post from mesh blueprint, and then you add the IK retargeter. Let me just go. This one, I think it was. Yeah. You just plop that in, you save it, you go back to your character blueprint, you select your new character that you made the IK rig and retargeting asset for. Uh, 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 Make sure you reselect your animation blueprint since that gets reset. Geez, what was the name? AWP Twin Plus. There you go. You compile that, you save that, and going in game. Again, ignore the weapons. They're part of the skeleton, part of the mesh. You now have your custom character that used a non-compatible skeleton working in motion with all the animations working just as you would expect them to. All right. There's that. The next thing I was going to show was retargeting, like walking animations or any animations you buy off the marketplace, be it like an animation pack, or you know, if you're making, let's say, a fantasy game and your character is by default using a two-handed axe or a sword and shield, whatever, and you want to swap these animations out because you feel like you know, your character casually walking like the mannequin does by default with a two-hander doesn't look quite right. So what we're going to do is going to open again, I'm using this free asset from the marketplace. um Wait, I think no, this one was not free, my bad. But yeah, this works with any animations you have. um I'm just using this as an example. So let's see, two-handed, let's go with these. Let's open this up. This is using the UE4 skeleton, as you can see here. And now the workflow here is a bit different, or the result is a bit different, since you can't quite go into the layers, the layer file, and be like, hey, do some magic here so you retarget from these assets over here. So what we're going to do is we're going back to the same place like here. You know, we're going to do all the same steps, but we will make sure that we can just select our assets here and go export selected animations. So what you can do is you can work with your you can create a retargeting asset, but instead of just using this at runtime, you can basically export out any animations using this retargeting definition. This will then create a copy of said animations, which you then can plop into a new definition file. So let us do that. Um, mm, mm, mm. So since this is a UE4, since we know this is the UE4 mannequin skeleton, we can skip making a new retargeting definition, and we can just use the RTG UE5 to UE4. Sorry, in this case, the UE4 to UE5, because now we're using an UE4 animation and we want to export it or convert it to an UE5 skeleton. So let us just do that. In order to do so, find the retargeting file. In this case, UE4 to UE5. You can just double click that. And as you can see, sort the animation we want to use, UE4, target UE5. You can see the target preview mesh is set to the many, and which is also being used by motion. And now we go to the asset browser, which shows us all the animations that the UE4 skeleton can use. And we already see the two-hand animations here. So we just play that. You can see how it's being retargeted. But instead of just making use of that file in an animation blueprint, we're just going to, let's select every file, press export selected animations. I'm just going to export them to this folder. We're going to wait a second, and we can see our newly converted retargeted. It even has a suffix saying retargeted. Not sure if 5.1 will bring any changes to that, so you can give them a custom suffix. But for now, let's just save this by hitting Ctrl+Shift+S. And let's open walk forward. So this looks pretty all right. And what we're going to do now is we are going back to our animation layers. So we don't necessarily want to change the existing unarmed, wait, where is it? There. So the motion already ships with this unarmed anim layers, which has all these animations already set. But we don't necessarily want to modify that, because let's say we have our fantasy game, where we have our character running around with a two-hander, but we also want to have animations for, let's say, when his inventory is empty, so they don't run around with a sword, and they won't run around with just their hands holding up as if they were holding something. So we're just gonna keep that, but instead we're just going to make a copy of that. You could make a new child blueprint based off the base layer, but I'm lazy, and so I'm just going to copy the existing one, since this one has already everything filled out. I'm just going to call this ABP underscore sword anim layers. I'm going to move that somewhere else. Let me make a new folder here, actually. Sword. And let me just move that in here. And while I'm at it, I'm going to take my animations that are retargeted and also move them in there. There we go. Nope. Freezing for a second. Please don't crash. That's nice. Very good. And now we have all our animations and our animation blueprint at one place. And opening this up, we will start by just swapping out the two-handed animations. Keep in mind, this drop down, this selection is not filtered by your skeleton. So in this case, they automatically got this like suffix where it says retargeted, and so I can just filter for that. Make sure to select the correct animation, otherwise your character will just T-pose and not run any animation. So in this case, we are forward, so we're just gonna swap this out, go backwards, go left, and go right. Hit compile, it's safe. What else did we have here? We have a jog animation. We can also swap that out then. We have our jog. Where's jog? There we go. Retargeted jog. This is forward, forward, backwards, left, and right. So now you may be wondering, what about the other animations? What about the starts we have, the walk starts? So you can mix and match in a way. So let me just show you. So the character will just start walking, and then just wait, one thing I always forget, and I keep this will change in the future version of Motion, because it annoys me myself. Um, we need to swap out the default layer that's being used by motion. So we're just gonna go AWP sort on them layers. For future version, I see myself swapping this out for more user-friendly way to configure this. Maybe just a variable. Actually, yeah, this should be quite easy to just add it to the configuration. But for now, open the construction script, swap it out, and if we go back into our plane editor session, you can see the walk starts are the default ones, and then we see our character holding an imaginary weapon for now. And if we start running, we also use the running two-handed animations. But as you can see, all the defaults like still work, and they will just blend into each other. So um, if you swap out animations with other animations you got from the marketplace, and you don't necessarily have starts animations to begin with, um, it will still work because the animations will just automatically blend into each other. So um, you can work on getting starts for your animations at a later point. It will still work. It might not look very nice in the beginning, but for getting started, I think that's still all right. Your core animations will still work. They'll still be blended in. You won't have any ugly T posing or whatever. But yeah, I recommend having a full set of animations that match whatever situation or you want to use that layer in. So having jump animations, having crouch animations, whatever it is here. Yeah, that's pretty much for swapping out the animations with new ones from the marketplace. Just give me a second to refill my water. Now, um, for the final for the final thing that was on my agenda for today, I wanted to talk about actions. So like dashing or anything else, and how you could possibly implement them. I know this is not quite about animations, but I want to give some pointers here. As in how you can do it right now, and for Motion 2.0, how we see this whole thing being controlled, and actually how you could do that yourself without waiting for Motion 2.0. So right now, what you would do is you would create a new motion component. In Motion 1.4, we make use of enhanced input actions, so you don't have to like listen for the input events in the main character blueprint and then send an event to the component. The component can just listen to it itself. I just added some basic logic here. Decides which animation to play, which direction goes, plays the montage. Very simply launches the character. Not the right way of doing it here. You would probably want to add root motion here instead, but for the sake of this demo, I just made it available here. So this is how you would do it now in a very basic manner. Instead, in the future, we want to make use of the gameplay ability system, which is also what I would recommend now if you don't want to wait for Motion 2.0 to start implementing into your ability based components. So anything dashing, but it could be even sprinting and sneaking, jumping, yeah, maybe crouching. All of these features um would be better off using the gameplay ability system, um, because using the gameplay ability system, all interesting features like ability cost. So if you have like stamina, mana, whatever, cooldown, um, playing montages, sound effects, and stuff like that, waiting for certain things, canceling an animation or canceling an ability, all that thing is already in there. We're not going to cover implementing features using the gameplay ability system in this stream. If you guys are interested, let me know in the Discord so I can prepare a separate stream for adding the gameplay ability system to Motion now. But yeah, for motion 2.0, which will also have stuff like multiplayer, C++ core, um, we will want to make use of the gameplay ability system because it's just a lot cleaner to do. And yeah, for the animations used here, same principle as just shown. Retarget them using whatever source you have. You know, in this case, UE4 animations to UE5. Export select animations and then slot them in. In this case, I'm manually playing a montage, so for abilities like that, you don't have to add them to the layers we have for the character blueprint. Let me just find that. Nope, that's not the one. But I should also talk about that in a second. Base layers, where's layers? There we go. So for anything movement, I would add it here. If it's, I mean, yeah, okay, you could, yeah, okay. Actually, let me think about this for a second. Okay, you can add anything movement based here. You could opt to not do it. For something like dashing, like I've got over here, you probably not want to do it. For something like aiming down sights, though, you probably want to do it here because then, in the base blueprint, um, or sorry, in the linked layer implementation in the base, you probably want to add some custom logic. You know, what happens, what is allowed to do, what should happen. You know, in case you're holding down right click or you're aiming down sights. Um, so if you have something that requires additional logic that intertwines with other animations, you probably want to add it to the layers definition. If it's something more of a one-off thing that doesn't interfere too much, like a dash would override any running animation because when you're walking, the dashing completely overrides how the character is moving. But with aiming down sights, you still might want to move, and just the upper arms or the upper body is affected by this animation. So you probably want to have that logic for blending, etc., in the animation blueprint, and for stuff that overrides, make a separate component. You make use of the gameplay ability system where you can also play montages, make use of canceling abilities and stuff like that. All right, I think I've covered everything for now. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Anything you want me to explain, anything you want to talk about, we have a bit more of time. But if there are no questions, I'd say that would be it for today. I probably have questions while trying to. Yeah, that's totally fine. If you don't have any questions right now, um, feel free to ask them in the motion or verified chat, preferably the motion channel in our Discord, rgn.st/discord. Yeah, anytime. Well, I'd say thanks for joining the stream. I hope this helped some of you. In case you don't have motion yet, check the description. If you have motion yet, we would really appreciate if you'd leave us a review on the marketplace. It really helps us out. And yeah, other than that, thanks again for watching, and you guys have a nice Sunday and see you next time. Bye.